few weeks ago, I solicited questions via my Instagram. If you don't follow me, here's my handle. Follow me on Instagram. And I really got some great questions. I whittled it down to 5 questions that I'm gonna answer here today. And everyone who asks one of the questions I'm gonna address here today is gonna get something special from my sponsors. All right, and the first one is a big one. It's from Weekend Warrior 86, and he asked, what do you think about the proposed speckled trout regulations in Louisiana? And of course, we don't know what those changes are gonna be yet, but I'm pretty certain there will be some changes at least. I predicted this day was coming in a column I wrote for the Times-Picayune about 3 years ago, and as I stated then, the regulation tightening is more for political reasons than biological reasons. There are some extreme environmental groups that hate the fact that Louisiana's speckled trout regulations are so liberal, and they've been fighting hard behind the scenes to get those changed. Now, does that mean that I believe speckled trout fishing has been good lately? No, it doesn't. In fact, it's been pretty poor for about the last decade, with some years in that span being better than others. But what has also been true for the last decade? The eastern half of the entire North American continent has been exceptionally wet and has experienced some of the worst flooding in history. And of course, all that water gets funneled via the Mississippi River into South Louisiana. And compounding the problem has been all the localized rain that we've gotten over the last decade. If you remember, Baton Rouge had a ridiculous flood just a few years ago. Even right now, as I record this, the Pearl River is sky high, dumping tons of fresh, muddy water into the eastern Lake Pontchartrain Basin. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that fresh water is actually great for speckled trout populations in general. Juvenile specks thrive in water that's almost completely fresh. That's where they do their best. But once they mature sexually, they have to move out to that salty water so they can spawn successfully. And if the rim of the coast is too fresh, they're just gonna keep pushing out till they get what they need. That's particularly true of the really big sows that we all love to catch. As a speckled trout ages, its ability to tolerate fresh water decreases. Those big fish need the salty water. Now, as those fish push farther and farther out, they become increasingly difficult to find, and many anglers won't run that far for the prospect of catching them. What's also true is those fish are not in the areas that the biologists sample with their gill nets, so anglers are bringing fewer fish to the docks, biologists are catching fewer in their gill nets, so that makes it appear that there's a problem that may not actually even exist. And for those of you old enough to remember, back in the late 1990s and early 2000s, the southeast U.S. underwent a severe drought. In fact, Toledo Bend and many other impoundments began to dry up, and many towns and cities had grave concerns about where they get fresh water. Down here along the Louisiana coast, salt water pushed its way into the marshes, and the speckled trout definitely noticed, particularly the monsters. In fact, 7 of the state's top 10 speckled trout were caught during that time frame. And on a personal note, that's when I caught my PB speckled trout. It was an 8-pound, 8-ounce fish that I caught on a Norton bull minnow in Calcasieu Lake in southwest Louisiana. Now, that fish today would be big news, but back then it earned me just a pat on the back from some buddies. That's it. So that 7 or 8 year stretch was not a normal weather pattern, and neither is this. The eastern part of the continent will eventually trend towards its climatological average, and so will the speckled trout fishing in Louisiana. And until that happens, changing the limits won't help one angler put any more speckled trout in the boat. Our next question is from Dejanay Mosley, who asked, what was the hardest part about starting your YouTube channel and getting things in order? I get this question a ton, and the honest answer is just surviving. If you don't have enough savings to just survive for 18 months, don't even consider starting a YouTube channel if you have any hopes of that channel earning you a living. It's exceptionally difficult to build an audience from zero, and to accomplish it, you need a list of factors, including consistently strong content that people want to watch, the self-discipline to produce quality videos even when very few people are watching, and you need online outlets that will run your videos to expose them to an even bigger audience. It's not a coincidence that the vast majority of successful YouTubers got their start when they were young, living at home with mommy and daddy still paying the bills. That wasn't true in my case, but guys like me are the exception that proves the rule. All right, our next question is from Robert Fortson, who asks, if you only had to choose one setup to fish in the marsh, what would you use? And for me, that's an easy answer. My favorite style of marsh fishing, what I always come to when conditions are tough, and other techniques are just not working is Texas rig fishing. If you watch my channel, you know that's the case. Whether it's craws or worms or Pro's Choice soft stick baits, whatever, I just have a high degree of confidence Texas rigging. And my favorite rod for that technique is a medium heavy power rod with a fast action. I just recently got my hands on a Lew's Pro TI that I just love. If you saw my last video, it's the first time I put it to use, but I cannot wait to catch fish on it this spring. It just feels so good in the hand. And I always tell people, go with the most expensive rod you can afford. If you're gonna skimp on the reel. It's not nearly as important. Give me a cheap reel with a really good rod, and I feel very confident I'll put some fish in the boat. Give me an expensive reel and a cheap rod, and I'd rather just go home. Our next question is from SD Jeffrey 7, who asks, what is your boating setup? Would you upgrade to something more offshore snapper friendly? But to me, moving to an offshore boat would be a downgrade, not an upgrade. Believe me, I like to fish offshore, but my real passion is pushing way back into the marsh to see what I can find. So a bigger boat would be a liability for my style of fishing more so than an asset. But let me show you what I got and why it suits my style of fishing. All right, in the macro sense, my boat is a G3 Bay 18 DLX, as you can see. I've had this boat for 6 years. I'm probably gonna make some changes soon, but I'm quite limited by the size of my garage. I refuse to store a boat outside. Very, very important to me. And my garage is only so deep. As you can see, I've got this one on an angle, and it just barely fits in the garage. So I'll never have a boat much bigger than this, but that's okay for me because of my style of fishing. Now this boat is painted aluminum. It looks kind of like fiberglass, but it's not. It's an aluminum boat, and aluminum provides benefits and drawbacks. Now some of the benefits are that aluminum in general is a lot cheaper than fiberglass, and it's also a lot lighter, so you get some really good fuel economy. Now because it's lighter, it doesn't ride quite as well as a fiberglass boat would. Now this boat does have a little bit of a V, and I can tell you the first time I rode in it, I was really pleasantly surprised at how well it rode for an aluminum boat. My expectations on aluminum are not very high, and this boat rode better than any aluminum boat I'd ever been in. Now starting at the back, it's powered by a 115 Yamaha, and I provide regular maintenance on this motor, changing the oil every 100 hours, and also the lower unit oil. And man, knock on wood, this motor has treated me so well. No complaints at all. Now inside of here, of course, is the gas tank and also the cranking battery to start the outboard. Now the fuel capacity in here is about 30 gallons. You can squeeze in a couple extra gallons, maybe 31, 32. I fill up every maybe 3 or 4 trips at most, and generally then it's not even a complete fill up. It's just great fuel economy with this boat. Now one of the nice features of this boat that not many aluminum boats come with is jump seats. Very comfortable for passengers. I generally will fish alone or with one other passenger, so I seldom put both of these to use, but it's nice to have when you need it. And right here is our live well. I'm not sure of the capacity, but it's pretty darn big, and I've never had fish die on me in here, so no complaints about that at all. All right here we got our center console seat. Really, it's more of a leaning post. I don't spend a whole lot of time sitting up on it, more just leaning against it. All of our gauges, and of course my Lowrance Elite 7 HDI. This thing is really, really outdated. This is one of those things on this boat that I kind of get a little bit frustrated with, that needs to be upgraded and will probably be substantially better on my next boat. This screen is just too small, and it's also just too dark. It's too difficult to see in really, really bright conditions. So my next GPS will definitely have a much, much larger screen that's substantially higher quality. They are expensive, however, as you know if you've tried to get one. Okay, and down here we got dual bank battery charger on board, of course. I'd hate to have to go back to the old days when I used to actually charge these things by hand with a remote charger. Pain in the butt. Go this route if you don't have one already. Now, one of the drawbacks of this boat is that it doesn't have a whole lot of storage. Certainly nothing long enough to hold rods or anything like that. So this kind of lives on the floor of my boat. This is my H&H push pole. I would never, ever, ever go fishing without this. I use it not every trip, maybe once every 10 trips, but when I need it, I really, really, really need it. This gives me the confidence to push deep into the marsh, into areas that I don't know, that I'm not familiar with, that I would definitely get stuck in if I didn't have a push pole. I would never go fishing without this. I'd be scared to death if I did. I'd stay only in the big lakes. Now this is the least used item on this boat. It's got a bait well, but come see this. Look what a disaster that is. I literally haven't even pulled this open in probably 5 years. I should probably just put the plug in and use it as storage, but I've never done that. Now the boat has port and starboard storage, and we keep a lot of stuff in there. It's kind of a mess, as you can tell, like most people's storage. And a really bad thing with this boat, something that they've actually changed in newer models, as you can tell, this is just flush with this, so it leaks like a sieve. Nothing even close to dry storage on this boat. Everything gets soaking wet, so you can't put anything in storage that's going to get wet, like your phone or anything like that. It's also got another storage hatch up front right here. Keep life jackets, the net, and some other sundry stuff, tools and stuff in here. Now the tools I do keep inside of a dry bag that is sealed and waterproof, and they stay very, very dry in there. Now I added these aftermarket straps to strap my rides down. These things are cheap, they tend to break a lot, but it's the only option I have because the boat, again, has no ride storage. It's just too short. Now this, of course, is my infamous pole that supported a seat. Can also be turned into a leaning post. This thing is seized up in here. Certainly I could take these screws out and get it out, but I have it here to use in case I put the seat back in here. And it's kind of become something that a lot of viewers and all my buddies laugh at, so I actually just kind of leave it out of spite. It doesn't ever get in my way, it doesn't really bother me. All right, the final feature of this boat is one of the most important, and that's my Minn Kota Tarova trolling motor. Now, I'm not paid a dime by Minn Kota. They are not a sponsor or anything like that, but this is just an essential piece of gear for me. I used to be a hand-controlled trolling motor guy, and I made the switch to the remote control, and I've got to tell you, for the first, I don't know, 5 to 10 times I used it, it was a little bit frustrating. Nothing was habit, nothing came easily, but now I would absolutely never go back. Everything, I don't even think about what I'm doing, I just automatically do it, and the spot lock feature is worth its weight in gold. No question about it, it helps me catch more fish. This particular one's a 24 volt, 80 pounds of thrust, more than enough for this boat. I've never exhausted a battery in a day's fishing, even when I've had that spot lock on a windy day with a big tide moving, and I'm just sitting in one spot catching fish one after another. These are not cheap, but again, well worth the money. All right, and this has absolutely nothing to do with the boat, but this trailer has a breakaway tongue, and that's essential for me. As I mentioned, I've got that small garage. I don't think it's smaller than most garages, but it's not big enough to fit, say, a 20, 24-foot boat. Even this 18-foot boat would be too big if I didn't have this breakaway tongue on the trailer. To me, it's a very, very important feature. Final question of the day is from Speckled Trout Man, who asks, will you take me fishing on your boat? And the answer to that is no. Alright, this video is a lot different than some others. We'll be on the water for the next video. But if you enjoyed this one, please give it a thumbs up. Also subscribe to the Marshman Masson channel on YouTube. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And if you haven't done so yet, click the join button and become a member of Marshman Masson. And until next time, if we don't see you in the marsh, we'll see you right here on Marshman Masson.